Welcome to the Walk Around Podcast, where our goal is to share with you the insights, the skills, the processes, and the leaders that are influencing the retail automotive landscape today. I'm one of your hosts, as always, Nick Funsch, and joined by Danny Vendrell. What's up, Danny?
How's it going, Nick? Good to see you.
It's going good. Good to be seen for sure. Super excited about today's guest. We have Kevin Hull with us. Welcome, Kevin.
Hey, Nick, Danny, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're glad you're here. Kevin is the manager of dealer talent services at JM&A Group. He assists dealers in driving employee performance and profitability while preparing the dealership of the future. Prior to joining JM&A Group, Kevin held multiple roles for an award-winning executive search firm, Brilliant, which included assisting in the initial startup, launching 2 new markets, sourcing acquisition targets, and leading the financial staffing, search, and management resource division. As part of their senior management team, Kevin assisted in the sale and transition to a new team backed by private equity. Kevin was named on the South Florida Business Journal's 40 Under 40 list in 2017. He's active in the South Florida community, and he sits on the board for Emerge Broward and previously sat on the board for Make-A-Wish Southern Florida. Most importantly, though, enjoys spending time with his wife and 3 kids. Let's take a walk around with Kevin.
That wasn't pretty intense there, Nick.
You're telling me I had to read all that. Goodness gracious.
Yeah.
So, Kevin, you've got a lot of expertise in the personnel space. I mean, what is it about kind of people and understanding kind of their behaviors and makeup that kind of excites you and helps you perform in your role?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I'm a human optimist, and I think people really have so much potential. And it's uncovering that potential that excites me. And in our data-driven digital world today, there's so many tools and resources that we can use to help elevate and optimize that talent. And that's really what gets me up in the morning to come into work and really help our dealers optimize who they have and start to learn a little bit more about their people to really drive performance.
Awesome.
Human optimist. Danny's going to love that one. I imagine that's where we're going next.
Yeah, there you go. That's my takeaway for the end of the episode.
Yeah, we got that out of the way quick.
Perfect. Let me make a note on. Kevin, so talent, recruitment, retention. I mean, there's such a narrative about these topics in the industry right now. And I'm curious, just what's your take on what the current state looks like? Like, let's level set. Let's get down to basics. Like, what is the current state from your position, your role that you're seeing in the industry of recruitment, retention, and talent?
Yeah, it's changed. It's very difficult. It's a very hard time to be a dealer and trying to attract talent. And there's a number of forces that are involved in that, right? If we think about the COVID or post-COVID world that we're entering into, COVID had some impacts on unemployment, significant unemployment. And the government did right, and they put out some incentives on some of the unemployed individuals to be incentivized if they were unemployed or laid off. And that's somewhat kind of backfiring now when we have record job opportunities and not enough people applying for those jobs. But I also think there's a deeper thread to this labor shortage per se, and it's demographics. And the demographics across the United States are changing, and those demographics are impacting the applicant pool that is available for a dealership. Just an example, since the 80s, about 11% of aged or prime age men are opting out of the workforce. So there's about 2.6 million prime of age men that are no longer participating in the workforce. And to the dealership, that's a big crunch when 81% of a dealership staff is men. So there's this demographic impact that's really having a huge impact on the labor shortages. And then I also think the model of recruiting in a dealership is outdated. I think it's more of the mindset of, we have the job, so the candidate should want to come to us, more of a post and they apply to the jobs using job boards as the prime sourcing tool. And recruiting is a sales activity. It's a sales and marketing activity. And It's not treated as much so today by some of our dealer partners. So it therefore, this labor shortage, not finding people, it just kind of all adds up.
It's interesting to me. I saw a stat recently. I think somewhere in the neighborhood of 7.5 to 8 million jobs were kind of open right now, which is high. I think the highest ever, which in some ways shifts the power from kind of the employer to the applicant. And we have this kind of traditional supply and demand challenge. And if you're not adapting to that, you can't just go hire anyone. It's as competitive as ever. So like, how do you kind of differentiate yourself in that space, or like, what do you do there?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, and I think the dealers are taking the steps to do it, but it's focused on the customer. And my conversations with our dealer partners is like, all of that effort, all of that money that you're investing in your digital sales process, your customer journey, it's the same journey for your applicant, right? So just double down, right? Like, it's the same journey. You just have to make a small tweak. Instead of going to buy car or service your car, you're going to the careers page, right? So I think one of the things that dealers should really double down on is creating a singular message for their customer, knowing that their customer could be someone that buys a car or could apply to the organization to work there. I also think that, in this digital world, sales starts online. And so if your applicant pool is a digital first generation, Gen Z, millennials, all of these are digital native generations, and you're not positioning your sale or positioning your organization online to attract them to you, it's an uphill battle for you. It's going to be extremely difficult.
And so how do you go about aligning kind of applicants with the ideal job? Because it's curious to me, like, if we're going to use the sales analogy, people don't come into the showroom and say, I just want something with 4 wheels that gets me from, my home to my office or my job. They're saying, hey, I want a truck. I need to have an SUV. I want a sports car, whatever those things are. Like, what are the steps employers can take to kind of proactively match kind of roles and applicants?
Yeah. And I think there's a number of ways to approach that. The first, just like anything, you want to start with strategy. It's what is it that you're trying to accomplish? What is this position's role in the overall organizational success? I've heard a couple of your recent guests talk about alignment or clarity on roles. And it's super important that you have the strategy that you're trying to deliver, whether it's customer, selling more cars online, increasing the retention of your customers through the service lane, whatever it may be, understanding the strategy, and then tying that position, that customer-oriented individual, that salesperson, that service advisor, to that strategy. What are the tasks? What are the skills? What are the systems? What are the processes that this person will be doing? And how is that aligned to our strategy? Once that's very clear, you can leverage tools, you can leverage behavioral-based interview questions, you can leverage a lot of different resources to identify the skills necessary to deliver on that strategy. And I think that's a critical component, is leveraging the tools and resources to understand who you're hiring, not as a filter, but as an understanding, so that when they do join the organization, you could really support and nourish them, build the talent versus going out and buying it.
That makes a lot of sense. So when you say taking a look at your internal strategy, what are you trying to accomplish, and then aligning the skills necessary to achieve that strategy. Talk to us about, like, what are the skills today versus the skills yesterday? Like, what should dealers be thinking about when it comes to bringing in people that will help usher them into the future, that will stay for a long time, that will be top performers?
Yeah. I think it goes back to the digital landscape that we're entering. And we have to look at, everyone uses Amazon as an example of what the future of the car business will be. Obviously, there's going to be some nuances and some changes, but you always hear that. Well, so then let's look at, what does Amazon hire, right? They hire for customer service. They hire for empathy. They hire for patience. They hire for question asking in some of their customer-oriented types of roles. They hire for technology. They hire innovative engineers to build systems and processes. So I would say that some of this core competencies and skills that we need to hire in automotive are going to be similar to that of Amazon, maybe not as much on the logistics and that side, but when we think about front of house activities, empathy, collaboration, great question asking, patience, customer orientation, customer success. Those are all going to be some key elements that we look to hire.
But how do you do that? How do you do that in the hiring process? Like, I mean, it's one thing to say it, and everybody wants like, hey, I want customer service. I want all those things. But what does it look like in action?
Yeah, I think you have to be intentional in your interview process, and you have to train your people on what to look for in an interview process and give them tools and resources to do that. So with JM&A and Dealer Talent Services, we leverage predictive index to help our dealer partners understand behavioral data, a very quick insight into the individual, not as the filter, but as a tool to increase the probability of success. So then we train these associates on how do you effectively ask questions of a sales consultant? What are the things that we need to understand about a successful salesperson, service advisor, whatever it may be, so that we can determine that in the interview process? We call it gut and science. And so when you combine gut and science, you leverage the data, but then you enhance your opinion and your gut instincts based off of what the data is telling you by asking behavioral based questions. The probability of success is much higher, right? It's, we use an analogy in the back of in the PDC back here. It's, we're playing baseball and we're trying to improve batting averages. Yeah. And if we improve batting averages by a couple of points, that's a lot of money to the bottom line of a deal.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think and I don't want to jump to a conclusion here, but it's like, hey, if you're good through that interview process of identifying, hey, here's where this candidate kind of fits, and here's where some potential friction points of the role, I think then is it fair to say then you can kind of customize the onboarding, training, and development? Right. It comes with a lot of customer service or sales. Like, how do you kind of do that? Is that fair to talk?
I think that's 100% fair. I think by understanding the individual that you're interviewing, you can determine their strengths and their potential blind spots. Look, our strengths are our potential blind spots. It's when we overuse or underuse our strengths, does that become our blind spot? So an example, if I'm highly assertive, there are components of the job where I need to be assertive to get the point across. But when I overuse that assertiveness with a customer, that could come across as controlling, authoritative. That could not be the right point or time to use that assertive trait. So I need to then coach and develop that individual not to use that assertiveness in these situations, but not diminish it in others. Does that make sense?
Well, I think a lot of things came into focus for me. Overusing my strengths become a blind spot there. But yes, I would say, but in the real world, it's like, hey, you may have a sales associate. I'm a sales manager. I have a sales associate who I always think is potentially challenging me or challenging my perspective, when the reality is they just may be naturally curious and they want to understand the why more. And it shows up like challenging their superior, in that mode. Is that kind
correct?
Of
that's right. It's their tone, it's their drive, it's their needs and that behavior. And unfortunately, most sales managers aren't trained psychologists, right? Or aren't trained. And so they see this behavior and they assume something. And those assumptions tend to be wrong. And then therefore they make a judgment on this individual, what could cause some friction between that individual and the work, that individual and the team, and that individual may leave. I also think one of the things that you had mentioned around the understanding of the person in the interview process and the value to onboarding is in this labor shortage, it's crucial that we keep top talent. We can't having the turn that we have. So understanding where this individual is going to naturally be comfortable in the job and potentially where they're going to have that friction or overuse some of their strengths, understanding that before they even start and communicating that to them, and then showing them a way forward and training and supporting them on that is critical to this individual's success. And then what happens is you're beginning to build talent. You're beginning to build this loyalty and foundation. And all the data points to when you begin to build talent, you have less turnover and actually higher performance.
I mean, it's so interesting what you're saying, because I think I'm just thinking back to some of my own experience in the past. And it's like understanding that where somebody is more comfortable in, some activity in the role, some task in the role, and they gravitate, chances are they're probably good at it if they're using it. But are we requiring all of the people on the team to do the same thing? If somebody's good on the phone, right, and we're requiring them to get, catch ups on the lot, is there a way that we can get the phone guy to help the guy on the lot, or vice versa? What's interesting to me is a lot of that stuff happens organically. Like, I've been a sales manager, and you're sitting there and you're talking about kind of, hey, Danny, for example, why don't you go make some phone calls with Kevin? Because Danny's good at it because he's comfortable or the other person's uncomfortable. And so I think people naturally kind of figure that out. But I believe what you're saying is there's some tools there that can help us get there quicker, which creates, a better return, right?
Return on effort, right?
Yeah.
Think about how much time, energy, and stress sales managers put into their people. And to your point, intuitively, they get it. But what if, let's use that same example. What if Danny just is never going to be as good at, or what if the individual that's sitting next to Danny isn't going to be as good as Danny on the phone, right?
Yeah.
But we can leverage Danny on the phone, and we can leverage this person in maybe the in-person conversations, or because that person gravitates and can build really good rapport. They're a great product specialist. How do we deviate the roles appropriately so that we're maximizing the energy of these individuals? Because what happens is, if we're trying to put Danny into a role where he's naturally maybe not wired appropriately, he's going to be exuding a lot of energy. And what happens is we're going to have inconsistent results, and we're also going to potentially have burnout. And, we talk a lot about this, Nick, right? Is this risk of burnout is so high, especially in this post-COVID world. And one thing I saw is there's a recent stat that came out that 1 in 4 employees or workers in the US today are considering quitting. And so just think about the implications that has in a labor shortage, right? And so the importance of building and keeping talent has never been more critical to your future success, because it's going to take you longer to fill that seat.
Danny, what are you thinking there, buddy?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's all the dots are connecting, right? So turnover is kind of the core challenge, something that we're experiencing. We understand there's some industry dynamics at play. And how do we want to approach that? Okay, so we know that people are leaving. If you take it all the way back to, well, what happened when you first hired that person? If you take the approach of the behavioral questions and understanding what motivates that person, and the job role alignment and putting them in the right spots and helping to leverage their strengths, all of those building blocks together is what then leads to increased retention, which then leads to a decrease in turnover. Am I connecting all the dots there correctly?
100%. And what excites me, and one of the main reasons I wanted to join, JM&A and JM Family, was that the auto dealers are unbelievable at process. When we think about sales, F&I, like, they have a process. They invest a tremendous amount of money in creating scripts so that the salesperson's following scripts, the BDC is following scripts, service, they're following scripts and processes. Today, there's a gap in their hiring process. There should be scripts for pre-screening and what you should be saying in an interview process and the training and development in those areas. And that's a big opportunity for our dealers. And the good news is it's not a huge lift. It's not like we're reinventing the wheel. It's things that they already are doing today, but we're just repositioning some of the language to be more focused on an applicant than the customer. But the journey, the message should be the same.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like the chances are a customer is going to go through a pretty similar process when they, show up, whether they engage with you online, on the phone, or walk into the showroom floor. They're going to get, within some deviation, a pretty similar process. The question I would ask myself is, if I'm a candidate, depending on how I engage, what's my experience is, and how similar is that? Because the other thing I think it drives, and we haven't really touched on it, I'm curious to get your thoughts, Kevin, is it impacts the culture of a store, right? I mean, there's really kind of that culture that a lot of dealerships strive for. I mean, when you kind of nail these things, the culture seems to come along with it.
Right. It's so important. It's the employer brand, right? And so when you think about employer brand, we're in the industry, we're using a lot of words of the consumer experience, the consumer journey represents your brand. What do you want the consumer to know about you? So that's why they're posting reviews about the consumer's experience and all those things. Applicants are looking at that, right?
Yeah.
Like applicants are making judgments on that, right? Applicants are deciding, is this a place that I want to work or not? A dealer that we work closely with had told me the story that they had this individual that came from another leading organization that was really digital forward, and they wanted to hire them. And that applicant spent about 5 to 7 hours researching this brand, applied to the position, but it took them 3 or 4 weeks to get back with them.
Wow.
Right. And luckily the applicant was very comfortable and was moving to the area. So they weren't like actively and wanted to work for this dealership because of their brand and who they are in the market. So they bought themselves some time because of what their customers said about them. But he's like, the dealer said, we really dropped the ball on the applicant side. Luckily, we didn't lose the candidate, but most dealers are losing the candidate because it's taking them too long to actually bring them back into the funnel.
So do you have kind of a really simple strategy that you recommend around kind of what that process should look like? Yeah,
it's 3 things. It's awareness. How are people becoming aware of your openings, right? Mm-hmm. How are applicants becoming aware of your jobs, right? Or your dealership? And I would say today we're focusing a lot on this awareness piece through the sourcing channel. So when I say a sourcing channel, Indeed, Monster, Career Builder, LinkedIn, we're focusing more on the active candidate. What the dealership really needs to start to focus on are these passive candidates. What they do really well on the customer side, it's the same thing they need to implement on the applicant side. The second piece is once you've gained this awareness of your brand and who you are they, when they're researching you, are they converting? Are they identifying that this is a place that they want to work? Are they going to your career pages? Are they doing the things that a customer would do that would buy a car or service a car from you? And then the third piece is the hiring experience, right? Yeah. How easy is it to apply for a job there? How quickly are somebody getting notified that they applied and that someone's going to be in touch with them? When somebody reaches out to them, what's the message? Hey, are you looking for a job? Or like, hey, we're super excited that you applied. Tell us a little bit more about you. And then it's the experience when they come into the dealership. Do they sit there at the front desk for an hour and wait for the sales manager? A sales manager walks past them 5 times. Hey, 1 minute. And then 2 hours later, they finally have an interview and they spend 10 minutes. Like all of those things are the key. So it's awareness. It's the research and evaluation. Does it make them actually want to move forward? And then it's the hiring experience. Is it aligned to set you up for success? And then the candidate success. Does it meet those expectations?
It sounds like just going back to how all those dots connect. You have the awareness, which is really driven by, just this conversation we were talking about. People are going to be looking at the reviews. They're going to be looking at what does the culture look like? What is it like to work there? LinkedIn, Glassdoor, these kinds of things. And by investing in your people, you're building your culture. And by building your culture, you're building potentially a wider net for the long-term talent landscape to want to come work at your dealership. So it's the cycle that continues.
That's right. And I would tell you, if a dealer talks about their customer journey and then their applicant journey, they're missing the boat. It's one journey, right? Because customers are going to look at employee reviews, right? There's so much opportunities out there. And so
Glassdoor. Does anybody check Glassdoor?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And then that customer that's there to buy a car, maybe they clicked on the wrong thing when they Googled Nick Funsch Auto and they got up to Glassdoor and they see all these bad reviews about the employer. Well, hey, I don't want to buy my car from there. I'm going to go to Danny down the street auto, right? And so there's all
some
Danny
creative names.
Danny would have a better name. He's in marketing, right?
But down the street motors.
Yeah. DDD, right? But so there's a whole lot I think that are tied to this customer experience. The one thing, and I'm going to jump on my soapbox real fast on this, is we also have to widen our pool, right? Yeah. Widen our stance. And I think the diversification of applicants who we're actually trying to attract into our industry is critical. And if we only look at college educated individuals and think that they have some a silver bullet to success, we're missing the boat. Because here's the reality: since 2011, 11% decline in college enrollments. So there's less people going to college, right? We already talked about this labor shortage. Then let's think about the kid coming out of college. Most individuals that are coming out of college are filled with debt.
Yeah.
And so now you're asking them to come into a commission only sales position or a draw with the, like, I don't care how hungry they are or how motivated they are. There's going to be some times where they'll be like, man, I need some consistency just to pay my bills. And all other organizations that are attracting that pool are giving them base salaries. So we're going uphill. We need to look at workforce development centers. We need to identify untapped sources of candidates so that we can actually, as an industry, really develop and build our talent.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, you mentioned diversity, and it's important, right? There's diversity of perspective. It provides so much value in any business, certainly in a dealership. And I think kind of widening that net is important. One of the things we really haven't talked about though is kind of referral program. Like you talk about sales, you got a referral program to go sell a car, right? I mean, what's your thoughts on referrals within a store and kind of that environment?
In learning this industry, the incentives are crazy, right? How we incentivize a customer, how we incentivize employees. And I love it. And I think one of the things that there's a huge opportunity for is to increase our incentives, right? For employee referrals and tie it to metrics, tie it to success, right? Like if I bring on Danny and Danny sells 20 cars 5 months from now, I should be given $100 kick or a $50 kick or whatever it is, because Danny's there. And now I'm invested in Danny's success, right? For the right reason. But I also think it goes to recruiting, right? Today, a lot of our dealer partners are treating recruiting, and I don't want to say this in a bad way, but more of an HR admin function, right? Where resumes are coming in, we're just picking through them and going through. Like, you need hunters, you need salespeople to be out there grinding and building relationship, networking, all those things, but they're not incentivizing the recruiting position that way. In our organization, I ran a sales organization that just happened. Our product we were selling were people. And so we incentivize our recruiters significantly based off of the number of individuals they could bring in and that we could place. There should be the same type of incentive on recruiting to attract recruiters into the industry to bring the funnel to us.
Yeah. Well, certainly people, I love the kind of people optimist, but I mean, it's complex, right? And kind of having some optimism around the value that individuals and unique individuals can bring to any organization. And I think being intentional about it, right? Pays dividends, right? I mean, I'm sold. Kevin, kind of closing thoughts. This has been a great, but I mean, if you had to kind of leave the audience with kind of one thing, two things, like what would that be? You already got on your soapbox, so like you got to pick something else.
All right. I would say it's focusing on your people, but leveraging gut and science. I think too often we just leverage our gut, and our gut could be wrong or could have some bias or have some emotion behind it. We could not be in a rational state of mind because of a number of environmental factors. But having some data point or some science just to use as a point of reference increases your probability of success. It just enhances it. I think it would be my key takeaway. Talent, as you mentioned, is very complex. And so just using one data source, your gut, it's not going to achieve the results you want. Leveraging two to give yourself some opportunities to really evaluate it, I think only puts yourself and your dealership in the driver's seat.
Yeah. Danny, so you can't use people optimist. What's your biggest takeaway from today's talk with Kevin?
Well, I told you I took a note on it. I believe it was human optimist.
Human optimist.
Was the word, right?
I guess I really connected with Nick on that one.
Yeah. Does that still count? No, I'm kidding. No, I think it's interesting to hear just the narrative of the turnover issue in the industry and know that, like, hey, there are tools and technology available. Leverage the fact that dealerships successfully implement processes every single day. What could that look like from the applicant's perspective? And just start from day one. So what does it look like for someone to see your job opening all the way through, and then what does that process look like? I think it sounds like there's a lot of opportunities there. What about you, Nick?
Yeah, I think it was kind of the gut and the science conversation. I was sitting here kind of reflecting and thinking just about myself, and it's like, hey, a lot of people wear some sort of fitness tracker. They wear these things to give them data to kind of calibrate how they're feeling. And, if it aligns, great, they proceed. If there's misalignment, they want to understand why. And I think it's the same thing when interviewing candidates, right? Is having, it's okay to have that kind of gut, but use some science or some data to back it up. So, Kevin, I've enjoyed this conversation.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that you can be a resource for anybody in the industry. And where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, I'm all over LinkedIn. So
Okay.
Probably be the best way to find me.
All right, Kevin Hall, we'll link to that in the comment section of this episode. If you like this episode, be sure to share it with your friends. Shoot us a message. Tell us what other topics you want to hear around the automotive industry. It's certainly a fascinating time to be in retail automotive. And we certainly enjoy the ride. So, Danny, thank you for your time. Producer Drew, as always, appreciate your help. And we'll see you on the next episode of The Walk Around.